In my last video about water mixable oils, which I will leave a link to in the description, I received quite a huge response. Everything from surprise and wonder to confusion and skepticism. That video was more of a here's what they are type introduction, where I covered why I use them, their performance, health issues, and cleanup. So in this video, I want to dive deeper. I'll tell you literally everything I know about water mixable oils as I demonstrate how I painted this summery emerald loch. So here's a little refresher about what these paints are. As I've said before, they are oil paints. They are virtually the same as any other oil paint that has ever existed. There's just one little unique feature. They've been engineered with a modified linseed oil that allows it to dissolve in water before it oxidizes. I say that because once it oxidizes or dries, it's permanent. So you can see the benefit, right? In theory, you only need water to thin them down and get a nice smooth brush stroke, and with a little bit of soap and water, you are squeaky clean. But it's not quite that simple. Over the years, I've learned through experience and countless hours of research that these special paints are not meant to be thinned down with water during the painting process. In fact, manufacturers caution the use of water during painting as it's too easy to dilute the paint too much, which could result in the pigment separating from the binder and leading to longevity issues. But a touch of water, especially on the first layer, which is what I do, is perfectly fine. Basically, what I'm trying to say is you should view these as regular oil paints, except that it's okay to add a tiny bit of water during painting, and all it takes to clean up is some soap and water. But we'll get into that later. I get tons of questions about adding mediums. Which ones should you use? Which ones shouldn't you use? And if you don't already know, a medium is a paint additive that changes the property of the paint. Some of them will speed up the drying time, like the famous and very stinky Liquin. Others will slow down the drying time, like refined linseed oil. Others will increase gloss or add thickness, and so much more. So you can see each medium provides a different use and experience. So I can't tell you which ones to use. But what I can say is that there are specially made mediums for water mixable oils, which allow you to get those properties while still cleaning up with soap and water. The only one that I use occasionally is the specially formulated fast drying medium. It makes my paint dry within a day or so. It also thins down the paint just slightly and makes it much easier to work with. For your convenience, I'll leave a link to the Jackson's Guide to Oil Painting, which is one of the best out there, and it has lots of information about mediums. And if you're enjoying this video, please tap that like button so YouTube knows that I'm doing a good job. One thing I get asked a lot about are brushes. I use the same brushes as when I use other oil paint or even sometimes acrylics, but brushes are another very personal matter. I like to have a variety because each one creates a different type of mark. There are soft bristles, stiff bristles, natural and synthetic, and you really only figure out which ones you like by trying them. So I recommend trying a few different types and brands before settling on buying a huge expensive set from one company. I use a combination of palette knives and brushes to create my paintings, and typically I start with a palette knife or big brushes. And when I say big brushes, I mean 6 to 8 inches. These Liquitex Freestyle synthetic brushes allow me to sweep huge amounts of paint onto the canvas and create really beautiful flowing gradients. Palette knife painting takes some practice, but allows for so much freedom in creating different types of strokes. Silicone palette knives are especially great because they flex when pressed against the canvas, so rather than scraping the paint away as much as a metal knife would, you can actually use them to blend the paint onto the canvas. I'll leave a link to all my favorite brushes and gear in the description below. This is the best part about water mixable oils. All you need is a bit of soap and water to dissolve wet paint off of your hands, brushes, and even clothing. To clean brushes, I use Master's Brush Cleaner, which comes in a little container. I have a bunch of these lying around, and as you can see, this one is well used. I like to break it up into pieces so I can massage the brush and really give the bristles a deep clean. If you don't thoroughly clean out your bristles, oil can build up and dry within and create a very stiff or even unusable brush. If I notice one of my brushes getting stiff, I will simply swirl it around in an old jar with a bit of soap and water and then let it sit overnight in the water. The next day I can rinse them out and they're almost like new. When it comes to painting with water mixable oils, by now it should be obvious that you can treat them like regular oils. This means you can paint with any mediums you like, keeping in mind that if you use anything that is not especially made for water mixable oils, you won't be able to clean up with soap and water. So if that's your priority, make sure you stick to a line of products that are made for these special paints. As for painting, you should abide by the laws of oil painting, such as fat over lean. And this really only applies when you're painting in layers. It means your top layer needs to dry slower and be more flexible than the underlayer. To break this down even further, I made a little graphic. Oil paint takes a long time to dry. Even if you can touch it, doesn't mean it's completely oxidized. So what do you think would happen if you painted over a layer of seemingly dry oil paint with a fast drying layer? The top layer would quickly dry, trapping the wet layer underneath. And as the layer underneath attempts to dry, it moves ever so slightly, creating cracks in the layer above. If you're impatient or don't want to worry about this stuff, you could always opt for working a la prima. This means you're painting wet into wet, all in one go. The beauty of this method is that you're not fussing with a bunch of layers. The challenge is that you're making quick decisions and finishing it all in one session. This means your paint is all one layer and it doesn't matter how long it takes to dry. Despite the challenge, I feel this is a great way to learn quickly at the beginning. There are lots of opinions about the best way to paint with oils, and I've learned that nothing beats experience. However, if you do want to dive into all the nitty-gritty details about it, I can highly recommend the Wet Canvas forums. Just type in a question and you'll get a waterfall of knowledge before ever even picking up a brush. I'll leave a link in the description below. Remember when I said oil paint takes a long time to dry? Yeah, it can actually take 6 months or more to fully oxidize, and I bet most of us would prefer to sell our work before then. There are lots of different ways to varnish an oil painting, and my method is very simple. If the painting is touch dry and I want to sell it, I use Artist Retouching Varnish. This varnish doesn't create a bond with the oil paint. It actually creates its own breathable layer on top, allowing the paint to continue to oxidize, yet giving it a nice satin finish and protecting it from dust and debris. I spray it on thinly 3 or 4 times, letting it dry overnight between coats. The reason it's called retouching varnish is because technically you can paint on top of this layer, or down the road you can remove it without damaging the oil painting. If I have more time to let the painting fully oxidize, so more than 6 months, I use liquid gloss varnish with a clean sponge applicator. I pour a very small amount onto the painting, tilt it until the majority is covered, then use the applicator to very gently spread it evenly across the entire painting, and removing any excess varnish. Typically, you don't want to disturb the liquid very much as it could result in tiny bubbles forming, so you might even want to use a very, very soft, clean brush. But you just want to make sure the painting is evenly covered. Varnishing not only protects the painting, but it will even out the overall finish or look, and it will make your colors appear richer and deeper. If the reason you're using the retouching varnish is because you don't want to wait 6 months or more to sell it, you should advise the buyer that they can take it to an art restoration shop, a curator, or even a really well-known framing shop for a final varnish after the painting has fully cured. Or they can do it themselves if they're willing to learn. And remember to use proper ventilation and protection when handling toxic materials. So I hope this video helped answer the rest of your questions. Don't forget to check out my other video about this topic, and as always, you can ask questions in the comments below. I do plan on making in-depth, step-by-step tutorials for how to paint with water mixable oils in the future, so if you're interested in that, make sure you subscribe. Thanks so much for watching this video, and I'll see you again soon.